I was looking around the basement and decided that I needed some more easy access storage space for relatively light things like some paint and tools. So I decided to go with metal L brackets. This is for light to medium duty use, meaning things that aren't super heavy, but also this will be strong enough to hold a decent amount of stuff. This is what the L bracket looks like, and you can see that there are 6 holes, 3 of which are used for structural stability to mount against the studs on the walls, and another 1 to 3 holes optionally are used to prevent the entire shelf from moving side to side too much. You can buy them pretty cheap, but I actually just found these brackets and decided to repurpose them. I'll be mounting it to these studs in the back in an unfinished area of the basement, so it doesn't really matter if this ends up being beautiful or not. The first step is to get a sense of where this will go. I'm just putting a piece of plywood against the wall here to figure out where I'd like to mount the brackets. Then I'm marking the 2x4s with a pencil. In my case, I'm just eyeballing it because it's not terribly important if it's perfectly level. It'll be good enough for a quick install. And for this step, I'm going to be using a regular Phillips screwdriver bit and a typical 18-volt Ryobi drill like you can find in any hardware store. To fasten the brackets, like a Tesla, I'm using these self-driving screws that I had laying around, which go in pretty fast, and they don't need a pilot hole to get them to go in easily. The exact length doesn't really matter much, but 1.5 inches more or less might be good, considering they'll be in a 4-inch length of wood. Here you can see I'm just using the drill to screw the bracket directly to the wall, with the bottom hole first, although probably the top one might have been easier. It's up to you. On this first one, I misaligned the bracket a little bit, so I went back and redid it. You can see it's pretty easy to remove screws and redo something if you make a little mistake. The plywood shelf fits on the brackets nicely, but it's still very wobbly at this point. So I'm going back in and doing the top 2 screws to make it more stable. And this is what will help to make the shelf strong and able to support heavier stuff. And when I tap the shelves now, you can see that they're a lot more stable than they were just a moment ago. Whether you use 2 or 3 or more of these brackets is really just going to take some testing. So be sure not to put anything fragile or important on these sorts of shelves until you figure out if they can hold the weight. And also, if you're mounting in a basement, make sure your stuff isn't too close to any hot water pipes or electric outlets. In other words, just be safe when you do this sort of thing. When I place the plywood on top again, it seems like it's shaping up to be a pretty decent shelf. At the end, I'll be mounting a small screw to the bottom of the plywood into the final hole just to make sure that the shelves don't shift around too much. This doesn't hold any weight, it's just to make sure that the plywood shelf doesn't shift around much, which it probably wouldn't anyway. So if it's a little crooked or doesn't go in all the way, it should still be just fine. Just to be sure, I'm also putting a screw in the middle of the back of the plywood, just so the shelf doesn't flip up if you put something really heavy on the front of it. This is optional, but it's a pretty good idea. If there's any chance someone else in your house might accidentally put something too heavy on it and flip the whole shelf over. If the screws are all mounted right, it should look something like this. And now for a real-world test to put some stuff on it. Looks good enough to me. And we're done. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe and like.